it seems like a structure that's designed, and I'm not a psychologist, but to create a dependency.
Absolutely, right.
And I can, the food stuff is something that we might laugh at because it's unfamiliar to us. And yet, when you look at it from kind of a more objective perspective, it's not really any more ridiculous. And I'm wondering how the major religions came to be so fascinated with sex as their tool.
Because it works.
Yes.
Because it works. Now, if you look at the Jewish religion, it has quite a few food rules. And not as many, in some ways, not as many rules around sex as the Protestant religions, the Islam, Catholicism. There's not quite as much there. So even within Western culture, we can see differences by religion. But the nice thing about sex is everybody's going to do it. And if we can make people feel guilty about it, we can propagate. We can spread our religion all over the place through what I call the guilt cycle, injecting people with lots of guilt. Now, Judaism is plenty of guilt, and plenty of guilt even around sex in some ways, but not nearly as much as the Catholic or the Protestant religions have.
In some ways, this seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? Because you would think, okay, yeah, everybody has sex occasionally, and pretty much when you have it, you like it. Mm-hmm. So you would think that the most successful religions in the world would be sex religions, right? Where everyone was having just phenomenal orgies and having a great time.
Yeah.
Simply because everyone enjoys sex. But so it seems counterintuitive that the way to have, at least in the West, very successful religious, moral, I hate to, I mean, it's a loaded word, but, the brainwashing,
right,
in terms of what you think is moral or not, is to have very strong prescriptions against something that most people would consider to be one of the most enjoyable activities in life.
Right, yeah.
And that's a little baffling, isn't it?
It is. Well, it's not baffling when you realize what the God virus is trying to do. It's trying to find the best way to infect you and your progeny. Because the most efficient way to manipulate and perpetuate a religion is from generation to generation. Parents raise their kids. You get the God virus from your parents. In fact, in my talk today, I talked about God viruses are sexually transmitted. I mean, religion is a sexually transmitted disease. You get it from your parents, and you get it because of so much emphasis is put on that. Man, we got off on sex real early in this program. What are we going to talk about the rest of the time?
This group is preoccupied with sex, and so we tend to get there.
I'm sorry.
None of us really know what foreplay is. We just want to rush right in. As a reminder, the phone lines are open. We can go ahead and put the number up. We're going to continue having the discussion here, but as a reminder that people watching, we are a live call-in show. We'll be taking calls, and you can. We'd appreciate it if you could direct them specifically to the book and the topics here. But we're not afraid. You can bring on questions about all kinds of stuff, and we'll give Daryl his trial by fire here today.
It gets back to the question of dependence. Because I think religion, has found it necessary in order to perpetuate itself to make people dependent upon the religion.
Right.
So, as George Smith talks about in his book, Atheism Case Against God, religion seems to have, and especially the major monotheisms, right, Christianity, Islam, a vested interest in things like guilt and unhappiness and human misery. The whole, Amazing Grace,
yes, right.
Who saved a wretch like me.
Yeah.
This whole idea of the program seems to be beat down the personal esteem of the individual, a person's self-esteem, so that specifically that self-esteem can then be reconstructed from the ground up. But now the religion is at the center of it.
Exactly. Right.
Do you need to go that far, though? Do you need to go to a point where you've beaten down the self-esteem and things, or do we, just as humans, have enough faults that are exploitable and concerns that are exploitable that you never have to do the breakdown part?
Yeah. Right. It's enough to just instill the guilt, right? This whole idea of, I don't think Mom saw me reach into the cookie jar, but if she did, right. What can happen?
Well, we internalize Mom's instructions. Mom said that's bad. We internalize it. When we violate the rule, we feel guilty. The same thing's going on. You internalize the rules of the local religious culture, whatever that is, and then when you violate the rule, you feel guilty. Now, when I was growing up, we were taught and taught and taught. Sex before religion, sex before marriage.
Sex before religion was awesome.
Sex before marriage is wrong. You're going to burn in hell if you do that. I was taught that over and over again. But can't tell you how many of the kids in our church had sex before marriage or got pregnant
before.
So it doesn't work. But that's not the issue. Religions really don't care that they don't want you to stop having sex. They want you to feel guilty as hell about it.
Right.
Because the only place you're going to feel relief from the guilt is to come back to this particular God virus. So if you're raised a Baptist, you have to come back to the Baptist church to get the forgiveness. Because Baptists don't go confess to the local priest. They never do that.
No.
Catholics don't come and go to Sunday school to get relief from their Catholic guilt. So it always brings you back to a very specific God virus. And that's the beauty of this system. It's guilt-driven, and it brings you back to that specific one you learned as a child.
Yeah. But again, it still seems funny that so much guilt and negativity would be associated with something that is, inherently pleasurable.
Yeah.
And I think that, and one thing I've noticed about, if you want to look back into the history of religion, at least in America, you want to talk about like the Puritan societies, the very first colonists who came over here. Now, of course, they had really strict, very theocratic rules. But what's interesting is that within marriage, if you were married and you weren't having enough sex, then they'd get upset with you for that. You could get in some real trouble in these Puritan communities in the 1600s, if you and the wife weren't, at least fairly regular in your, connubial bliss, right?
Right.
And so it's not necessarily so much, well, certainly it's guilt towards sex, but it's guilt towards the non-approved sexual practices that are specifically endorsed by the religion. If you're procreating to create more little believers for the religion, and you're doing it within a marriage structure, that's great. It's just 8 times a day, and we'll bring the candy just to make sure, flowers and whatever. But anything other than that is just no. It's not just sex. They want sex to serve a specific function that again benefits the religion.
Right.
So I'm not completely sure that I'm in complete agreement with you on one point, and I'd like to get you to kind of address this as the arbiter. No, you mentioned how it seemed kind of counterintuitive that we might feel guilty over something that would be viewed as pleasurable. And while you were saying that, I was thinking about how we do tend to feel guilty. If you're having too good a time, and it's, I think, because we empathize with others. So the question is, does the guilt come naturally to us because we're empathetic, or is that guilt something that is a sideline that has been taught, I guess, or infused into this? I mean, is there a possibility to be empathetic and happy without any guilt over it? Or are we just destined as creatures we're going to feel guilty about stuff?
I don't think guilt is built right in. You have to learn guilt. And you have to learn a pattern of behavior around guilt. And different cultures have different guilts, if you will. So if, for example, one of the things I talked about today was the concept, or the idea, the behavior of masturbation, which all primates do and all humans are going to do. But isn't it interesting that almost every major religion has sanctions about masturbation? It's wrong, and you're going to burn in hell if you do it. The Catholics are very clear about that. And the Protestants, most Protestant religions, while they're not as clear about it, certainly come out against it, if you will. And lots of other religions do that too. So why would a religion prohibit something that is absolutely going to happen anyway? There's no way to prevent it. So that tells us that religion's got a different motive. There's a hidden agenda there. And that's, you have to learn to be guilty about something, and you have to learn it from the religion. Once you learn it, then you have to come back to the religion to relieve yourself of the guilt.
Right.
You're going to do it. Every primate does it. Almost every human. Albert Ellis was fond of saying, the great psychotherapist, he was fond of saying that 97% of men will admit to masturbating, and the other 3% are lying. I don't know. He never said anything.
Or maybe the other way around, like 3% will admit, and the other 97%. I don't do that.
Well,
really.
Yeah. But either way, and women do it too. There's no doubt about that. If you know something's going to happen and you can teach people to feel guilty about it, then you got a perfect cycle to bring people back into that particular God virus. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful system. It works perfectly.
It's interesting, though. We should make the distinction, of course, that the things that religion wants us to feel guilty about, such as normal sexual pleasures or normal sexual development as adolescents, when you will experiment with things like masturbation and whatever, and these are not necessarily, are hardly ever things that generally are harmful, the things that religion, because in certain situations, guilt can be a perfectly good thing, right?
Sure.
I mean, there are genuinely bad acts that human beings can commit, and you get caught. So if you steal something from a store or something like that, you get caught, you feel guilty about that, and hopefully the guilt helps you to rehabilitate and learn that lesson. Right. Oh, I shouldn't be a thief. I shouldn't do this or that or the other crime. Right. So there are good ways to apply guilt. But what religion does is it focuses on things that, when you think about it, it's like, well, wait, how is that?
Right.
Yeah, relevant to anything. These are, how is this a harm?